Shut up and sit down.
I am a radical libertarian.
And we don't want the government to do a damn thing.
The current state of politics is unsustainable, politically, economically.
You deserve better.
It is about supporting, platforming, and assisting the people who are out here actually doing the fight.
You just take an issue that's important to you and do something.
There you go.
You are part of that declaration against tyranny.
Because no one brings tear gas to a gunfight.
This conversation gives me a little more hope for the future.
The one, the only.
Fight for liberty.
This is the cherry on top.
This is FSM.
Hello, fighters. Welcome back to Fight for Liberty Live. I am your host, David Fite, here to get you fired up about making the world a freer place. Today, we have an awesome guest. We're sitting down with Pat Ford of the Coalition Radio Network to talk about the importance of getting raw information out into the world. But first, we're going to show our sponsors a little bit of love. First up, as always, you know them, you love them, Blood of Tyrants wine. If you are looking for a nice night in while sipping the blood of your enemies and supporting the destruction of the tyrannical state, look no further than Blood of Tyrants wine, a nice Merlot distributed by activists you know and love. BloodofTyrants.wine is the place to go. Use promo code FSM to get 10% off your first order. Again, that's bloodofTyrants.wine, or click the link in the description and use promo code FSM. Next up, we have Crafton Business Services. Crafton is dedicated to helping entrepreneurs start, grow, and maintain their businesses by providing a wide variety of products and services to make your business more efficient, manageable, and profitable. Now, Crafton understands how frustrating getting your business off the ground can be. That's why they've put together their business-in-a-box solutions to turn your idea or side hustle into a fully functioning company in one place for one transparent cost. So for under $1,000, you get the corporate filing, registered agent, a logo, business cards, marketing strategy, and an accounting consultation to get you started off on the right foot. All of that for just $9.99 plus state theft. And if you're looking for a little more than that, you can add a custom website, web hosting, more marketing material, more time with their marketing team, and 5 times the bookkeeping services, and your first box of business cards for $24.99, again, plus state theft. And if you already have a business, Crafton can help you grow to new levels with targeted marketing campaigns, affiliate programs, website and social media redesigns, and more, or help make your business less of a headache with streamlined accounting, tax prep, and compliance. All of this can be found over at crafton.us, and use the promo code FSM, again, to help support the network and the show. And if you get one of those business-in-a-box packages, you get a free, really cool t-shirt if you use our promo code. So definitely check all that stuff out. But without further ado, our guest this evening is a broadcaster and journalist from up here in the Northeast, Region 8 rep in the Libertarian National Committee, and the founder of the Coalition Radio Network, Mr. Pat Ford. Welcome to the show.
Do a shameless plug for Blood of Tyrants. As we speak right now, on a tractor trailer is heading 2 skids, 2 pallets, if you will, of the Blood of Tyrants new energy drink. And I'll be working with the fine folks, that family organization headed by Dan Taxation's Beth Berman, to distribute that throughout the Northeast. So I'm wildly looking forward to that.
Hell yeah. I love it when my guests help me promote my sponsors. That's always a good time.
Absolutely.
And I was actually just on the phone with Dan a couple days ago talking about how excited he is to ship some stuff up to you and get that underway. I am so excited to try that energy drink. As my guests can probably tell by now, I very much like energy drinks. I drink them often. I usually put them inside of this awesome Lions of Liberty koozie. But almost every episode I'm drinking an energy drink. And I like to do the healthier-ish ones. So, they're like the no sugar, right, no calorie ones. But they're still, there's still a lot of caffeine and not quite as healthy as what Blood of Tyrants is doing. So I'm kind of hoping to both wean off of the heavily carbonated stuff as well as the heavily caffeinated stuff to something a little bit more manageable, like what they're doing. So I'm excited for that for
sure. Better living through chemistry. That's what I say.
Amen. So I always like to start off with kind of a testimonial type question, if you will. So I'm curious, how did you find out that you were a libertarian?
All right. So, interestingly enough, my father, who passed away last year, was nearly a 40-year employee of the United States Postal Service. So, as the Libertarian Party was in its infancy, and I wasn't that much older, my father would come home and regale me with stories about the United States military. He was a 4-year veteran of World War II. In fact, next month he's going to be interred with full military honors in Arlington. But he would tell me stories about the military, incredible stories. He would tell me stories about the chaos of the post office. And one of the recurring lessons was how ideas start off often in their infancy as great ideas. You know, people caring about people, looking to solve problems, provide solutions. And then as the government seeps into it, you've got the inevitable mission creep, you've got the inevitable chaos, the inevitable feudal-like empire building, you've got increases in costs, and after a while, they don't resemble anything near the original intentions. So that I grew up in that environment. And you know, the irony, of course, is that my father was an award-winning soldier and again a lifelong management type at the post office, you know, which is literally the federal poster child for failure, right? And that's where I became, and then you know how I got involved in the party. True story. I'm a talk radio junkie, old school talk radio, and there's a show up in Boston. In fact, we managed during the 2020 campaign to get Joe on this show for a full hour. And it's WBZ is the station, and they cover about, depending on the atmospheric conditions, it'll cover up to 30 states. I've called into the show from Tennessee, okay? And I'm driving along one late night, and the host of the show, who I kind of was known to because I was a regular caller, you know, I call in and he goes, Pat, you know, you're going to want to talk to this guy. And I've been listening to him. He's talking about small government, personal responsibility, personal freedom. And he goes, Pat, I want you to meet Gary Johnson. First time I'd ever talked to Gary, first time I'd ever actually talked to a libertarian. This is back in 12, an active member of the party. And, you know, 12 years later, here I am. You know, it's just I still remember that conversation to the day. It lasted about a minute. And when I finally met Gary in person during the 16 campaign, we just had a couple of laughs and a couple of tears over it. Because I am, despite the fact that I'm probably one of the more radical libertarians in the party, I started out as a Gary Johnson libertarian, as did a lot of us.
Here.
And it was a wonderful starting point for a lot of people. For some folks, that's still their comfort zone, and that's fine. But that was my introduction to the Libertarian Party.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, that's a much cooler version of the story than most of my previous guests have had, but including myself, a lot of, I'd say a solid at least quarter to a third of the answers to the variations of those questions had something like Gary Johnson comes up in that first question on almost every episode, at least somewhere. But most of us, it was like, you know, we saw something on Facebook. Now we actually got to talk to the guy, and you got to meet him 4 years before I ever heard of him. So, you know, you got a little bit cooler of a version of that story. But I do agree with you. Like you said, a lot of people came in through Gary, and some of us have gone, all right, now we're a little bit more radical. Now we want messaging that's a little bit stronger than what Gary said. I personally, like, I have one major problem with him, and that was he said we're only going to legalize marijuana and not touch the rest of the drugs. Like that was like a pointed answer that he gave. And that was the one that, like, looking back, I'm like, that's not libertarian. But I loved him when he was running, and the fact that he was running with another governor gave him credibility like that. I don't know if I would have joined the party if I didn't hear two-term Republican governors from Democratic states. That phrase was, I think, the key phrase that sold a lot of us on the LP as an actual viable something to hitch our wagon to. And now I know that that's not the case, but I've, you know, sunken cost fallacy at this point.
Well, you know, what Gary was able to deliver, and I'm not at all a Bill Weld fan, and someday I'll tell you a funny story if you want me to tell it to you later on tonight. That's great about me and Bill Weld. But Gary brought an air of legitimacy you know, to a party that unfairly had been characterized as fringe. And his candidacy brought us another step along, a major step along. Now, again, we've come to recognize that the war on drugs is an epic failure, that it needs to end, that all drugs need to be legalized. Personally, my stance on borders is that borders are a gesture by an authoritarian government that maybe existed hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago, that had nothing to do at all with the natural transport or the natural living of individuals in that region, was meant for their own economic gain and their own power. So I oppose all borders, all of them. I'm at the very extreme. And that wouldn't have been palatable in 2016, but it's something I openly discuss. One of my favorite hashtags is end public education, excuse me. And I spend a lot of time on local media, and I'm happy to debate that and unapologetically, because ultimately we need in our everyday lives to become unapologetically libertarian. And in doing so, we will gain strength. People will hear our words, hear our messages. Personally, I as a member of the LNC, I'm not going to endorse anybody. Not that, my endorsement means, I don't know. I get a kick out of when
I'm keeping my mouth shut too.
Right, but I can't. I don't think it's appropriate, because I need whoever is the nominee. The more, 10 minutes after the convention's over, I show up and go, how can I help? That's all that matters. I didn't support Jo Jorgensen initially. I ended up being her communications person for New England, and spent a lot of time boots on the ground with Seth Levy and some wonderful people from a variety of libertarian backgrounds. But, ultimately what I want right now is a candidate who is unapologetically, politely, but quite frankly, a little edgy in terms of being libertarian. Let's focus on defending to what seems us an outlandish, our outlandish beliefs to the normies, if you will. But let's do it provocatively, and let's not shy away from it. That's what we are. And if that means we get a point and a half less in terms of votes, I don't care, because I'm here to help establish a libertarian nation.
Yeah, I think at this point I'm very much with you, and you just dropped a name that's gonna let me do a sneaky, half-hearted endorsement, because I won't say any actual endorsements, but I'll say Seth Levy. I think picked the right team this time around.
Seth, I can't. I met Seth, and I'm going to see him in Maine. So you remind me to some shameless self-promotion about the Libertarian Party of Maine, which is, I believe, a stellar organization based on what they've done. But I'm going to be seeing him in 2 weeks in Maine. There's going to be a registration drive. We're supposed to happen this weekend. Weather, here we go. But he and the campaign that he's working with is going to be there in force. Chase is going to be there, and there might be some other people. There's a real opportunity for sort of a kumbaya moment in the northern hills of Maine, and I welcome that, because Seth is one of the, I believe, when it comes to boots on the ground campaign and logistics, one of the most competent people in the party writ large. There's no question about it. I traveled with him in 2020 throughout the, I was one of the managers, if you will, one of the campaign stops. I think we did 7 cities in 3 days, in 3 states, and it was very successful. And we got me. There's a picture that comes up in my Facebook memories. It's of Jo Jorgensen. One of my proudest moments in that campaign is surrounded by media people jamming their microphones into her, trying to get her to answer questions. It was a true media gaggle, and it was a moment.
Nice.
And we need more moments like that.
Hell yeah.
So,
well, speaking of media gaggles, like seamless transition here. How did you get into the broadcasting world?
Well, in 2014, myself and a guy named Tony Jones founded an organization we called it the Coalition. And I like to joke, and it's a joke, but I like to say that we were single issue coalition before single issue coalitions were cool, because we recognize that there's an historic overlap between progressives of goodwill and libertarians on a lot of key issues. Criminal justice reform being first and foremost, the war on drugs, different approaches to attacking, the homeless situation, and by the way, not attacking the homeless at the same time. We were there's a lot of us are let's get crazy, huh? A lot of us are anti-war, and a lot of us are looking for, if government has to exist in some form for now, for some competency and less greed. And so when you see those overlapping issues, what I used to joke about, and I still do to a certain degree, is that when I get on with progressive, and I've spent going on 10 years working arm in arm, testifying, protesting, advocating, engaging in national mutual aid with progressives, All right. I always joke that let's figure out how we can fix all the things we agree on. And 20 years from now, we can get pissed off at each other again and start calling each other names. And
True that.
and it's worked. It's worked in Rhode Island. Again, remarkable overlap on everything, stadium subsidies to corporate cronyism to virtually every issue, and particularly with regard to criminal justice reform. So I'm proud to be on a number of and a member of a number of groups, both individually and with my media company, fighting things like solitary confinement, which is still a huge issue in Rhode Island, fighting for the defelonization, if you will, of different quantities of drugs, which is a very practical way to begin the end of the war on drugs. So we're not effectively criminalizing an illness, which is addiction. Issues like that, particularly at the state affiliate level, can be addressed provocatively in forms of testifying, protesting, writing legislation. And I'm proud to say that our group is engaged in all of that, including an ongoing weekly effort in terms of mutual aid, actually delivering a couple of things to homeless encampments throughout our little state. So it's all of that is part of being a libertarian. All of that is what's the common parlance? I think it's libertarian as fuck. And you can engage in all of that regardless of whatever madness is going on in what I call libertarian Game of Thrones international. Everyone can do something every day. It's what I preach. It's kind of like going to the gym, right? People should work to doing one thing a day to end the state. One thing a day. Some days it can be profound. You could donate to a candidate. You could actually walk with a candidate. You can call into local talk radio and develop and deliver to people a libertarian view of a current event that isn't filled with hate, rage, names, or anything like that. You can do that. You can testify. You can actually engage in writing legislation or modifying legislation. Rhode Island is one of the few states where we've actually had Defend the Guard heard as a bill for the first time this year, and we're going to do it again this year because doing legislation is a multi-year process.
Yes.
And you've got to stick with it at the beginning and end. These are all things that any one of us, you don't need a title. You don't need to be elected anything. You can simply decide one day that you're going to start working to aggressively end the state. And all of us can do it. There's no magic. And I'm here to help, from my little tiny perch on the LNC. I'm here to help anyone who wants to do that. Literally, we've had great success in around New England. I sometimes wonder if being in an overly oppressed part of the country, like being in overly oppressed other countries, works towards firing people up to fight for liberty. Because in New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, significant events have taken place in the last year.
Yes. I very much agree with you there. Oh, sorry. I just, because I lived in New York City for 4.5 years, and it's not a very hospitable environment to big L libertarians by any stretch of the imagination. But I have argued on multiple public platforms, even, especially if you consider yelling very loudly in a bar a public platform, that New York City is one of the most libertarian parts of the country, because you will not find a population more just okay with committing a felony just because it's easier. It's a shortcut to work, and you will not find a population with more personal stories, whether they're firsthand or secondhand, but at least, secondhand from like a close friend or family, of just absolute government overreach, oppression, tyranny. Somebody's, their uncle's in jail for a bag of weed back in '86 and he's still in jail. Like, that's a thing that, even though it's legal in New York, we still have people who are in jail for less than an eighth of marijuana. And, you just don't have that level of those stories in other parts of the country, and especially not for as long. I feel like even like Chicago and LA and some of the other cities have kind of ebbed and flowed politically, where New York, even when we had big progressive soft on crime leadership, we still had really terrible tyrannical people at the head of the police department who were still, we had stop and frisk going for almost a decade after
Oh,
we ended stop and frisk. You know what I mean? So
I lived in New York City during the height of stop and frisk. I had an apartment. I double dutied. I lived up in Rhode Island. We had a family. My wife's family had a rent controlled apartment. I'm a hardcore libertarian unless I can score a deal, right? $440 a month, 2-bedroom walk up, 3 blocks in from Queens Boulevard, off the number 7, 20 minutes to Midtown.
Oh, God. Yeah, I would have kept that shit too, man. I do not judge you even a little bit on that.
My libertarian principles went right out the door. So no, I listen, I agree with you. And here's the thing. There are wonderful things happening. And it's frustrating given the era of negativity on social media that, let's use Maine as an example briefly. The state of Maine absconded with Maine's party status a few years back, in your typical middle of the night state move. And Harrison Kemp got together with a handful of other libertarians and working with members of the Senate who are libertarian leaning, drafted. Okay, you ready for this? I want to make sure that no one in your audience is either drinking hot liquids or operating heavy equipment. Okay, so I'll give you a second to pause. Make sure you put it down. So imagine this. Imagine a world, right, where legislation was drafted, it was submitted to committee, it didn't pass the first year. The next year, it was resubmitted to committee. I got an opportunity to testify remotely. There was a snowstorm. I was going to go up there, but I got an opportunity to testify remotely, and it passed committee. And it got voted up on the floor of the Maine General Assembly, and then the governor signed it. And what it did was it reduced the registration requirement from 10,000 libertarians to 5,000 libertarians for what I'll call semi-permanent ballot status. No one, certainly there was chatter on social media. Certainly, people argued about it. But the reality was a group of people set forth an objective and executed it pretty much flawlessly. And as a result, we've got an opportunity. Everyone in the Northeast, anyone from anywhere who wants to help, can just go to the Libertarian Party of Maine website. They can donate. They can, if you're anywhere in the Northeast and you want to spend a quality weekend in Portland, Maine, and Saco, Maine, technically, you can go up and we've got this ongoing registration drive, and it looks like it's going to happen. And the net result of that is that Maine, which has got a split electoral vote, has ranked choice voting for the presidency, is a real opportunity to do some real damage, if you will, to the duopoly in a place where it's affordable to run campaigns and you've got solid state leadership. Said Harrison Kemp and his executive board have done a masterful job of actually doing it.
Yeah.
Not just talking about it. In Vermont, Olga Murdoch-Duclerc, as I always say, that's her name, is the Vermont state sheriff. All right. She worked tirelessly to create a coalition with anti-war groups, and to begin the promotion of the Defend a Guard legislation of Vermont. She built up a strong enough coalition that this year we actually had a state rep do the jump from the Republican Party to the Libertarian Party. And it's funny because at the end of the session, each minority leader, each political leader gets to make a speech from each party. And so the Republican did, and the Democratic did, and the Libertarian did, even though we've got a caucus of one. But I'll tell you what was astonishing about that. We, as a group, we organized a press event. And I've got the video, and I'm happy to share it. We put it up on social media, but we're happy to share it again. Imagine this, again, imagine a world where we held a press event and we spent weeks organizing it. And you always try to organize something so that if the magic happens, you're prepared. We sold it hard. We worked it hard. We had all 4 networks represented at the press conference. One guy did double duty. All of them did private interviews with our state rep. There were about a dozen or so active journalists in a presser that took almost an hour, where they bombarded us with questions. And one of the networks actually picked it up. If you've ever gone to the homepage of a local Fox or NBC affiliate, they'll have stories from around the country. One of them picked up our gig. And part of the fun was we intentionally marketed as a Republican, Republicans lose a seat. Now, of course, we ended up getting our story played in over 40 major cities around the country.
That's
and you
incredible.
know what the cost? You know what the cost of the Vermont Party and to the Libertarian National Committee was to do that?
15K.
0.0.
Oh, nice.
It cost us nothing to do that, but we were organized, we were on message, and we had a whole group of talented people covering literally every aspect of it. That's what can happen and throughout the press conference, we were unapologetically libertarian.
Yeah. I want to circle back to like the last point that you made about why you're fired up about Maine, is the competent state leadership thing, and like I'm not here to shit on anybody, but like that's something that a lot of states just don't have, right? Unfortunately, there are a lot of people that are watching this show that are like, I would love for something like that to be happening here, but A, my state is a lot different of a landscape than Maine, and B, my state chair is a dipshit. You know, I mean, my state chair is okay, but he's not really doing anything. Like, we're not doing anything in New York. The state chair before him
I'll debate you on that. I actually have worked proactively with New York. I mean, they're in my region.
Right.
And, you know, and actually it's funny, you talk about campaigning in New York City. I spent a marvelous weekend petitioning in the last go around on the streets of New York City. I think I was on like 23rd and 3rd, you know, and, you know,
for
and I
you or
actually, for Larry and the federal delegation, it was, you know, I was petitioning for everyone. I was actually trivia here in terms of getting stuff done. I was actually, as a test case, the first non-New Yorker to be allowed to petition in the state of New York. And at the time, Cody Anderson was the state chair, and I petitioned with a group of people at the Albany Tulip Festival, which we killed it at. We had a great time, and we killed it. We got a lot of signatures, and I'm not very good at that, admittedly. But we struck lightning. That was literally the weekend after Roe v. Wade went down. So what used to be the conversation with an upstate New York liberal was, how do you feel about, well, the government should stay out of, you know, abortion and blah, 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 blah. And they would think that was a terrible thing. Well, that week, the government got involved in abortion. So now all of a sudden, when they ask me, what does the Libertarian Party think about, you know, the government being involved in abortion? I said, the government has no place being there. And they would literally, in cases, grab the sign-up form and sign the petition on the spot. So again, you see, here, one of my biggest objectives is to get people to overcome the notion that they have to be an officer, that they have to have a title, that they have to run or control an affiliate, that they have to have any of that to fight for liberty. Titles help. I'm not going to listen. I go into certain situations and I say, you know, to a state government, I say, I'm on the board of directors of the Libertarian Party. I'm not going to deny that there are situations where having a title helps. But the fight to end solitary confinement in my state, which is still ongoing, it's one of the worst states in the nation. As I remind our governor routinely at press conferences, that if Rhode Island were in fact a sovereign nation, we would be considered a torture state by the United Nations. I love to invoke the UN. I love to use liberal terms and words, you know, in their context. But, you know, you don't have to be anything to do that. Yeah. You can fight any battle you want. I don't know of a state chair that's going to get up and say, when someone comes in, hey, listen, we want to volunteer to do a group public comment at XYZ City Council or Board of, no, you can't do it. No, of course. Most of the state chairs I know,
there are a few, but not in your region.
The state chairs that I work with, if they can get people to show up, because the biggest challenge facing the party is that everybody sits on their hands and thinks that winning arguments in social media mean anything in the real world. I would be thrilled to get someone just people to show up with a pulse.
Yeah.
Just absolutely.
Yeah, I'm with you. And like I said, I wasn't trying to like shit on like Colsty and the current state like affiliate here in New York. I'm just saying it's very different than Maine is my point. Is that, you know, we're not moving and shaking in the way that Maine is. But luckily for me, I'm only 6.5 hours away from Maine, so I will probably see you there next weekend.
Hopefully. And let's do a live spot while we're up there. Let's have some fun with it.
Heck yeah!
All right, you're gonna have a couple of at least 2 of the presidential candidates have committed. Others might show, and let's just make it happen. I mean, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
But I know you want to ask me questions about reporting and things like that. So I could talk LP, Game of Thrones, endlessly. That's my turn. Endlessly for days.
Fair enough. I've most of the time in conversations that are a little bit of both like this, I'll ask a direct question on topic, and then somehow it'll get back to the Game of Thrones stuff, and then I'll just ask another on topic question, then I'll get back. So it's about half and half, and it works out. I kind of did the same thing with Dave Smith a couple weeks ago. I wasn't planning on talking to him at all about internal baseball, and it was still about half the episode.
It's part of our life.
Yeah. So who's the coolest person you've interviewed so far?
Wow. I'm going to think about that. I interviewed Gary a couple of times. Wow. Drawing a blank for a second, which is terrible because you're going to laugh at me in a second. Ran for president.
For us?
Made his fortune in software. McAfee.
Oh, McAfee.
Yeah, absolutely one of the wildest interviews that I ever had. I've done a lot of stuff.
I can watch that.
Well, this was on AM radio. I actually did fill in.
Listen,
and I interviewed. I gotta see if I have it. But one of the first questions I asked to McAfee was, John, was, tell us how you feel about, because this was around the time of something called FOSTA SESA, which is some pretty repressive federal legislation that does what federal legislation always does, which was it was meant to end, sexual slavery and sexual, but in what it actually ended up doing was endangering a lot of lives and hurting a lot of people. Shocker, right? So I asked him how he felt about, the decriminalization of sex work, as in #sex work is work. And he opened up. Now remember, this is on AM, a real AM.
John McAfee if he supports sex work. I did this morning and last night too.
Well, it was one of the great moments. And he goes, well, my wife's former pimp is trying to kill me. Alrighty then.
I don't know why I thought the middle of that story was a good place to take a drink. That was just a dumb David move. My computer almost just got covered in orange juice.
So I mean, how do you? There's and again, I'm on at the time. How do you even
come back from that?
Oh, it was a test. I found out that day unequivocally. There were two things I found out that day because at the same show, I think it was. One of my in and out songs. Great thing about AM radio as opposed to streaming is that you get to do, in and out, intro, outro songs. And my songs were Rage Against the Machine, Anti-Flag, and Talking Heads.
Nice.
And Bob Marley. Okay, so those are my songs. And the producer accidentally, we had someone else on that they played a live version of a Rage Against the Machine tune, which is relatively profane. And there was a moment where he was all the way down the hall, and all of a sudden you got we're on a delay, and he essentially does, it's like the OJ, where he just throws himself at the board. He didn't make it. So all I know is I realized that day that station management never listened to my shows, because we had a week later, we had a couple of sex workers on who were talking about police oppression. And that was actually the subject of the show, was police oppression. And one was a activist and active sex worker in Providence. Another one was a sex worker and active in California. And they're just building themselves up into a frenzy. And I'm just throwing the popcorn, right? I'm just like watching back. And all of a sudden, this woman, Bella Robinson, who's a friend, goes, you know what? By the way, is this family radio? You know what? All the cops want to do is have us suck their cock anyway. And this is on AM radio. You can blurb that out if you have to. And this is, these are people who are actively engaged in sex work and the politics at the same time. Mm-hmm. Because unbeknownst to most people, in most states, a significant number of states at this point, it is not illegal for a police officer to have sexual contact with someone who's a sex worker. Yep. We all watch on TV how that's supposed to never happen, and if it happens, it ends the case. And no, that's not the real world. So those are the kind of moments you talk about. Cool moments. It's when you're on camera with somebody, anything can happen. The first time I interviewed a guy named Jack Reed. Have you ever heard of Jack Reed? If you haven't, it's okay.
I have.
All right. So he's the for listeners who haven't, he's the quiet man of national politics. He's a United States Senator. He's head of the Senate Armed Services Committee. He's a graduate of West Point and a veteran of the 82nd Airborne. This guy is arguably one of the most powerful men in the world, and he happens to be the Rhode Island senator. So I run into him constantly with what I call fake check events. You know, they got this federal largesse, that federal largesse. And the rule in journalism is you're supposed to stay on top for that day. Screw that. If you're in front of me, man, it's whatever goes. So the very first question I got to ask Jack Reed, I kind of half intentionally, half unintentionally muddled through because I was a little nervous. And I said, Senator Reed, you're head of the military Senate Armed Services Committee. Okay. This was the day after the assassination of the Haitian president at the time, a couple of years ago. And I said, Senator Reed, did the United States have any complicity whatsoever in the assassination of the Haitian president?
Attaboy. That's
magic. What's the song? Magic Moments. And he stood there for a second, and he looked at me, and then I've been in sales most of my life. I know how to read body language. I caught him for this guy's a pro, an international pro. But for a quarter of a second there, I had him. A month or so later, it turns out that two of the assassins were actually veterans. I think the term was the University of the Americas, which is down in Fort Benning, Georgia. So then I asked the senator, is it still the policy of the United States military to train future assassins? Which went over as well as you can expect.
Wow. I love it. That's great.
I have the greatest job in the world. If you're a libertarian, I get to ask all the questions that because I'm on the there's this fictional kind of like dividing line. I usually sit next to the guy who's I know the Channel 10 NBC cameraman real well. I'm either used to them or the CBS guys. So I'm on that other side of the mystical where I get to ask questions at these gaggles. And I asked our governor, when interest rates started to spike, our governor, who is, again, one of my favorite philosophers that I look to in life, of course, is Ricky Ricardo. And so my governor is, in fact, a Mamaluga. And so he was complaining about interest rates increases. So at a press conference, I said, Governor, you do understand, of course, that the excessive spending by the federal government created the inflationary spiral, which effectively can only be fought by increasing interest rates. And the guy actually goes to me, well, I'm not an economist, but yeah, this is our governor.
Yeah.
So saw him 2 days later, and I said, Governor, just if I could follow up with you on the inflation interest rate question, you do realize that if senior citizens who live on a fixed income, their retirement savings have been gutted the last few years, absolutely gutted. And this increase in interest rates actually allows them to regain some type of cash flow on what is usually a fixed investment. So for seniors, it's actually very important that interest rates sort of rebound. Well, a rising tide lifts all boats. Now, at this point, he's pissed. And I kind of mumbled to him, so, Governor, why do you hate senior citizens? So I'm waiting for you to take a drink every time now. That's what I'm going to do.
It's a good strategy.
I get a spray on air. So you asked me just about experiences. 4 times in the last 2 years, videos of mine have been used by the Rhode Island State Police to use it to investigate actual events, because I show up to everything. I show up to protests. I love protests. I was at one earlier today. I've been to 3 in the last week. And I'm going to tell you, libertarians, we need to learn to protest.
Hell yes.
I don't give it. I constantly get that. Well, you're not going to block traffic, are you? And I'm like, yeah, of course I'm going to. Of course you're going to block traffic. That's the point.
Yeah.
To piss people off.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's
the protest.
I don't know if I can support that. I don't know if that's a product. Someone's got to explain to libertarians that no one's going to wake up and decide, you know what, those libertarians are right. I'm going to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
The only thing that works, I worked in New York City during the days of the HIV crisis and ACT UP. I learned a lot about political theater from ACT UP. I learned a lot about political theater from the Bernie people. my socialist communist friends, as I only call my friends, they know this, commies, do a really good job we were at a governor's opioid council meeting with about 100 or so of the poobahs of Rhode Island medical industry, and friends of mine came in and interrupted because of the conditions. 4 people have died at Rhode Island prison. Remember, our prisons we're a tiny state. 4 people have died at prisons this year. There's been no independent investigation. Was that impolite? Yes, it was. Was it a little rude? Yeah, it was rude. Did it work? Yeah, it did. It raised issues and made people confront issues that they were afraid to do. We need to get activism, and we need to get the protest gene into our DNA as libertarians. If we don't do so, we will continue to be an afterthought politically.
100%. I could not agree more. And it's funny because you said that you call your friends commies to their face. I think my 2 favorite groups of people are people that you can call commies to their face and they're okay with it. It's libertarians who know it's a joke, and actual commies that are just okay with it. And
sometimes I call them godless communists. All right.
There you go. But back to my race in New York City back in 2019. I protested with communists the whole fucking time. Like radical, like tear down capitalism, burn it down style communists. We're talking like Extinction Rebellion, Sunrise Movement, BLM, No New Jails, like some of like the core, like most extreme anarchist communist organizations that are popular in New York City. And I didn't get any like official endorsements from any of those groups. I'm not Spike Cohen, unfortunately. I don't get BLM chapters to actually endorse me in my races, but someday. And but I did, however, get both the New York City Extinction Rebellion and New York City No New Jails to have most of their leadership that was it within my district. Unfortunately, a lot of people weren't voted for me. A lot of them told their friends and family about me. And to this day, like, I still don't know how I got as many votes as I did, because I got about 7 times as many votes as doors that got knocked in that race. And I wasn't campaigning at these protests. I was just protesting.
That's a critical distinction, because empathy and understanding are very powerful tools. When you protest alongside, listen, we can all agree. And by the way, the chant Attica didn't arise because New York State prisons were model facilities. The chant Attica has taken on a long-term implication because of just how crappy, and just how terrible Northeastern most prisons are. So if you're willing to lend your voice and your body and your person to cause it, and by the way, again, criminal justice reform is as libertarian as fuck. It just is. So if we're not actively engaging and all we're doing is talking about it and we're not showing up, how do people expect us to gain empathy and connect with the community? I visit homeless encampments for a couple of reasons. One of which is to help out, but the second of which is to understand what's really happening. I can't get that by watching the news. And if you get back to my fundamental reason for my business existence, is that the news simply refuses to invest in the type of assets and bandwidth, which have cut 1,000 times over me. All right. They refuse to actually really cover the story. It's a quick hit, drive-by type of experience, despite the fact that they have enormous capacity and, quite frankly, enormous responsibility. People need to remind the media that the historic trade-off between organizations like CBS and ABC and NBC getting the licenses to the airway, they have licensed airways, they do not own them. All right, was because of the in exchange for providing news content, functional news content. We've as a country have forgotten to enforce, and they have seemingly allowed the notion to dissolve that they don't own their airwaves. They are granted them on, albeit a long-term, but ultimately temporary basis. And the responsibility that they have, the quid pro quo, is that they are supposed to aggressively cover news, and they don't.
They don't.
at all.
Not
So
at
if
all.
they were doing their job, I wouldn't have one.
Yeah.
It's really that simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of
Go
the
ahead. I'm sorry.
main, sorry, I was just gonna say one of the main reasons why we chose to add the word corporation into our branding for Free Speech Media Corp once we became an actual C Corp is
Mhm.
as a kind of a play on the term corporate media. That's just a thing that
Right.
you call like the bad guys, right? That's like a
Mhm.
nice bucket term for the bad guys. And I want to be like the one corporate media outlet that isn't one of those people. And I mean, there are other ones out there that are technically corporations and whatnot, but there's a little bit of that like kind of play on the status quo that I'm going after with the name there, because like you said, they're just not covering it at all. We do a lot of things with You Are the Power, where there's just no news coverage of these things. Stuff like what you're talking about. Homeless encampments getting torn up, people getting arrested, people that
Mhm.
are trying to feed those homeless people, getting
Mhm.
threatened and arrested and harassed and abused, and nobody wants to cover it. No one, not MSNBC, who's literally making billions and billions and billions of dollars off of the cops are evil. Like that's their whole narrative, right? The cops are
Right.
evil. Why are they in New York City where nothing is changing and nothing really that crazy is happening on a day-to-day basis, and not in Columbia, South Carolina, where people are getting arrested for trying to feed homeless people?
Right. Well, it's and there's a couple of us in Rhode Island who do independent media. A guy named Steve Alquist, who I joke is one of my godless communist friends. Um, and there's a couple of us who do it. And this is the difference. All right. If you go to my videos, you'll see me march. The network affiliates will stand apart and they'll declare that's because they need to be independent. Now, no one has ever been independent in the media, ever. Newspapers that came up during the era of the railroad barons were started by railroad barons in order to promote their perspective on what was then the single biggest commercial battle in America, the control of the rail lines. All right. Ever since then, every media outlet has got a bias. It's nonsense to think that they don't. But they'll kind of hover up and outside of the protests. What myself and my friend Steve do is, during the big Black Lives Matter protests, we marched in them with our cell phone on a lanyard and actually just marched in the middle of the. I now what I do is I have a pretty good tripod. I put my cell phone. I blast live stream from the march, from inside the march, so people see and hear and feel what's going on. And it's they get a real sense of the people involved and a better sense of the issues. We sat down right next to. We had a situation where in Rhode Island, incredibly enough, Reader's Digest version, there's something called bail on 32, and if you're on probation and you get arrested, not convicted, but arrested and charged, the you are automatically sent to the state prison without any due process. You're not even arraigned yet. You're sent to the state prison for what's supposed to be a period of 10 days. Now, if it actually happens within 10 days, there's still a pretty good chance you've lost your job. And your apartment or your life, whatever life you have, might be in danger. Reality, it takes sometimes weeks or months for people to get charged, in which case their entire life is destroyed.
Yeah.
So we had in Rhode Island, next to our criminal courthouse, people who were wearing inside were handcuffed to each other and then covered by large casts. All right, heavy casts that blocked the entrance to the for the prisoners bus to leave to go to the state prison that day. We shut the whole thing down. And there were a couple of us who just sat there in the middle of it and just live streamed the entire event. And that's all of a sudden you see that there are real people doing it. It isn't an acronym. It isn't BLM. It isn't, whether if let's just say back in the day with the HIV protests, it wasn't anytime anyone uses the term the in front of a group or a population, then you know that they're just marginalizing those people. So it wasn't the gays, it wasn't the BLM. It was actually, you see that the
The
real
Jews.
people.
Sorry.
The Jews. Fill it all in. There's an example, the sex worker, it's not that, and it gives the issue real life. And if media isn't doing that, then they've failed. And the media has largely failed in this country, not because of all the reasons that the Republicans will scream about, the whataboutism that dominates discussions about the media. It's just on a fundamental level, they're not delivering any sort of, what does Springsteen say? What was it? 102 channels and nothing's on. What was the song? I forget. But that's the problem that exists right now. We've got incredible bandwidth to deliver as much information about an issue as you want, and they refuse to do it. One of the things I do is I've got a website now. It's very basic. It essentially points to a YouTube playlist I call Blink and Watch. I actually load up to my YouTube page every day. I have, and it's not that big a deal, but I have press privileges, if you will, with the State Department and the Department of Defense. So I load up all their speeches and everything, all their things every day. So we're going to include their white papers. But there is a segment of the population that wants to understand why we're in Ukraine. Why? What? Where's the Powell Doctrine? I don't know if you remember that, but the Powell Doctrine was that in case of a military incursion or support of the military mission, there had to be a reason, a why. There had to be an exit strategy. There had to be, large scale buy-in, perhaps even, God forbid, a declaration of war. All of that, and none of that exists now. Doesn't matter whether it's Republican or Democrat. They all, Ukraine has been described by some as the single biggest yard sale in Raytheon history, where every single weapon system got cleared off and sold, except not at a bargain price. And it got paid for by the American people. So again, I put that up there because that's information. People, if they want to avail themselves of it, they can. And they probably should.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest issues is just getting that information out there, and I think you made a really good point about showing people that it's real people out there doing a lot of this stuff, especially when it comes to the protesting and the coalition building and that kind of stuff. Because I think one of the most common arguments that I will get into on social media that I actually will fight tooth and nail on, because I just fucking grinds my gears in a way that almost no other topic actually bothers me this bad, is when someone will say to me that we cannot reach the left. Like there is no reason for a libertarian to go to a BLM march because it is impossible for us to get anything out of it, to reach anyone with it, to do any of that. It is just not worth it. And that's simply not true. Right. It's just factually bullshit based on, because the thing is, like, this is one of those topics that subjective experience is actually an objective argument to disprove the topic, right? Because to say that there is no possible way any subjective experience to the contrary proves that incorrect. So normally I don't get into subjective arguments, but in this case it actually is a valid argument. And no, I have done it. I have brought people into the party from BLM, from No New Jails, from Tulsi Gabbard's campaign, from Bernie Sanders' campaign, from Tom Steyer's campaign, from Andrew Yang's campaign. I brought people into the LP from Curtis Sliwa's campaign for mayor of New York City. I've brought people into the LP from whoever the asshole Republican that ran in 2018
which
for
one?
Governor. The one that ran against Larry, the first big time in 2018. There was a lot of people that supported him because he thought he could win for whatever reason, and when they realized that they were just being lied to, they were like, all right, let's give this, this other guy did better than anyone said we were going to do, and our guy did half of what they said we were going to do, so let's go hear this guy out. And a lot of there are multiple people that have joined the LP because of it. I've seen people get brought into this movement from all sorts of places. Dave Smith and I were talking about how many people he's brought out to Skankfest that are just comedy fans that all of a sudden are like showing up to an LP state convention. You know, I met people at Porkfest like that, you know, literally found the LP because of terrible dirty horror comedy. Like and you know, there's just no end to the avenues that we can bring people in. And so if somebody's like, no, that's stupid, we shouldn't even bother, that's like the one argument that I'll be like, nah, motherfucker, let's hash this one out.
We need to avail ourselves. You know, sometimes it comes down to simple numbers. There's a lot more of them than there are of us. And you've got an opportunity with these coalitions after you've invested some time. You know, just don't show up at the first meeting and think you're going to, you know, get up there and talk about Mises, or you're going to talk about, you know, any one of a number of libertarian economists. It's like any other group of people. You you work with folks, show up to events. You don't have to give up your principles. You don't. And quite frankly, there's more of them for us to talk to than there is of us for them to talk to. I mean, it's math. You know, it really is. And these folks, particularly since there's a shortage of elected libertarians, if we and look at Maine, you know, they got legislation passed by Republicans and some Democrats, even though it would potentially create competition to them because they articulated a strong message. There was consistent follow through. There was all the stuff you need to do to actually get laws enacted. And that's what we need a lot more of. And we need to look outward from the party in order to engage with people. And, you know, one of the reasons I do my media thing is because I could sit around and wait for it, but it wasn't going to happen. And I don't know if I'm one person enough that's going to change things radically, but you know what? There's some guy now who questions the head of the Senate Armed Services Committee. I got into a debate with him, conversation, because I don't debate them. I just ask them questions. My job is not to argue with them. My job is to get them to discuss where they stand on an issue. And I had a conversation with Senator Reid about cluster bombs, and I pointed out that, you know, it's the United States. A little trivia here is one of the only major nations that's not a party to the cluster bomb, if you will, convention, that we will not sign anything to oppose cluster bombs. And cluster bombs are despicable.
Yeah.
You know, we as a society routinely weigh in against landmines, justifiably so. Cluster bombs are nothing more than airborne landmines. And the notion that, according to this treaty with Ukraine, or this memorandum of understanding, that somehow we're only going to use bombs that have a 2% dud rate, and that's, you know, how many will fail initially when they land. They won't explode on contact, and somehow that the Ukraine army is only going to use them against Russian soldiers and is not going to use them in a civilian area. I asked him, and he stuck to his guns, if you will, literally, and said that, you know, that they've got a history of conforming to that. And I just said, you know, I've never served in combat. He has. So in the heat of combat and someone's getting shot at, are they thinking about a memorandum of understanding between the United States State and Defense Departments and Zelensky? I don't think they are. But, you know, again, I got him to talk on the subject because it's all about not shitposting, not, you know, I don't know if you're old enough to remember Stuttering John from Stern, but that's not the solution. The solution is to ask technical questions. You had asked me offline about filming in court, and I've had the opportunity on a number of occasions to film court cases. And simply by being there and showing up, we caught then at the time, the number 2 guy in the Rhode Island Department of Health in a lie in court, where he said that children had died of corona. And later on, when confronted with the video evidence, and it's on my site, his words were, "I may have misspoken." And this guy is named by the name of Dr. McDonald. And guess where he's the health director now? New York. And I've got hours of video footage, basically him, not me portraying him. This was in court. him being a thorough buffoon on the subject of corona, of masking. In Rhode Island, they've already won the states. I should say a city in Rhode Island, Barrington, Rhode Island, actually capitulated. They fired 3 teachers because they refused to take the shot on medical grounds. Now, a lot of people will be cynical and they say, "Wow, that's just an act." Well, 2 years after they've been fired, they were still objecting on medical grounds, and they could have gotten their job back. Well, they actually ended up the city of or the town of Barrington, Rhode Island, ended up settling with them, giving their jobs back pay and $100,000 settlement because the town of Barrington violated virtually every open meetings violation possible. It was arbitrary and capricious. So you can win these things.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to be assholes. What we can be is committed, aggressive, on topic, philosophically sound libertarians who take our philosophy and apply it to the real world. We can do that, all of us. We have got, in terms of IQ, we got a lot of smart people in our group. Like, as we say up here, wicked smart. So, if we can just find ways to stick to that and actually face outward instead of eating our own young, we can change the world. And I always end up every conversation, every speech I give, I said, we always, and people now know this, about says, we have one thing in our favor that no other political philosophy does. We're right.
True that.
I mean, it's really that simple.
Yeah. Totally off topic, but I think you'll appreciate this. I used the word wicked in a sentence with someone who's like a newer acquaintance of mine and who doesn't know where I'm from and just assumed that I was from like New England, specifically like Boston, and started just ripping me apart with Boston jokes. And I'm like, I'm from New York, homie. I just say wicked.
Listen, try this. If any of my friends from Massachusetts are listening, I say to them, go to them, look earnestly in their eyes and say, you know what? I've spent a lot of time in Massachusetts and the Boston area. It's wonderful. It's an amazing suburb of New York City.
Oh my God, I love it. I've made the same joke about DC a couple times.
Then you wax poetic and say, it's kind of like the 6th borough, it's kind of like an outer borough. You got your Brooklyn, Bronx, Queens, Staten Island, right? Manhattan, and then you got your Boston, all right? And then if they're sports fans, because Boston fans there's 2 things you can do to Boston sports fans. Number one, look at them earnestly in the eyes and say, I've got a question for you. And it's a combination of physics, aerodynamics, and spirituality. What's that? How does someone catch a football on the top of a helmet? All right, just say that to them.
Okay, see, I did grow, even though I'm from New York, I grew up as a New England Patriots fan, so that specific joke hurts.
And then the last one is, if you're a native of the New York metropolitan area, on occasion, Massachusetts-based sports teams win, and I always explain to them that they're not really going to have. It's God's sort of practical joke on you that your teams win to keep you engaged, to make you think that you've got a sports future. And if they're not mad at that, then you just, inevitably they'll say to you, well, if you like it so much down there, why don't you move up? And you just tell them, hey, I'm colonizing. That's all. Try that.
Love it.
Okay. So, but hit me between the eyes. What do you got? What else can I?
I was just gonna tack on because I grew up in a place where I'm basically equidistant from the Bills Stadium, the Jets Giants Stadium, and the Patriots Stadium. It's about 4 hours either way. The Bills is technically the closer. It's 3, but the other 2 are a little over 4 hours from me. So I basically just like. My cousin was a Patriots fan, and so I was like, okay, the rest of my family was either Bills or Giants fans, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna be with you because you seem to know what you're talking about. The dude's literally a sports announcer now, so like he knew his sports, and so I grew up as a Yankees Patriots fan, which sounds like I was just a like bandwagon douchebag, but I was a Yankees fan like from birth. Because of my family, and a Patriots fan since pre-Brady, and so I like stick to that very, very heartfelt. That like I wasn't a bandwagon fan for either team, and I stuck with the Yankees basically through their worst stretch in like modern history. Was the time that I was rooting for them actively, from me being like 12 to 18. They fucking sucked during those years. I think they only made it to one World Series in that stretch that I was actually watching football or baseball. But yeah, I get to it was a fun couple of years, because like, you know, the Patriots and the Yankees are arguably the two best teams in their sports, and it's fun.
I'm enjoying. I used to work across the street from Gillette Stadium. I'm enjoying their demise greatly. I'm a New York Football Giants fan, a New York Jets fan. Whichever team in New York is going to continue to display the superiority of all things New York, because Rhode Island is the center of liberty everywhere. New York is and it is, by the way. These folks who talk about this, like Lexington and Concord bullshit, the sinking of the HMS Gaspee actually predated by a couple of years any of those little Bunker Hill dust-ups or whatever. So Rhode Island actually is the birthplace of liberty, where I live now. Rhode Island is the birthplace of religious freedom because of Roger Williams. The first synagogue in America was in Newport, Rhode Island. So literally, Rhode Island is the birthplace of everything that we fight for. And so when I hear the Boston folks do this Liberty Trail nonsense, I'll just say to folks from around the country who are listening, if you come up to New England, spend a day in Boston. It's kind of cute, kind of blasé. It's kind of like every crappy mid-level big city in America. If you want some fun, come down to Rhode Island. I'll give you the quick tour. There's more place to have fun. There's more places to sin. We got better beaches, better restaurants for less money. And again, I'll show you a couple of places that were literally the birthplace of liberty, arguably in the world. And it all happened in Rhode Island. I'm a homer. I love Rhode Island now. I'm a big fan.
I love
so.
I've only heard good things. I've been there twice, I want to say, but
Mhm.
very, very briefly both times. One as a kid, one as an adult. But so definitely hoping to go back. Basically, same thing with Maine. I think I've spent about the same, like 36 hours total in Maine, and so I need to fix that too.
If you do what we all do, which is we parachute in, I petitioned in 2020, and this is why Frost State, Frost affiliate volunteerism, and volunteerism in general has to be introduced. My cliche is into the DNA of the Libertarian Party. Right, 2020 in Maine. I don't have the exact numbers, so don't hold me to this, but there are a bunch of us who went up to Maine in the height of the Rona. It was horrifically hot summer. It was just terrible, and I got thrown out of whole paycheck twice in the parking lot. I had people screaming at me, which I think they thought that would intimidate me, but I actually enjoyed it. You know,
don't bully me. It's my kink.
I told one lady who was screaming at me about, you know, that I was going to help Trump win, and I just couldn't resist it. I said, "Ma'am, just so you know, I know where you live now. I'm going to report into the Trump campaign, and they're going to want to have a word with you." At which point, she just lost control. Good time.
Oh my God, that's beautiful.
So again, I was thrown out a whole paycheck twice. You know, it was terrible. But here's the happy ending of the story. I forget the exact number. I think I got like 15 signatures in 2 days. It was embarrassingly bad. And I was like ready to give up like 5 times. Like, I'm out of here. This is nuts. I wouldn't even. So I handed them to the folks who were doing it. They turned them in. And there was a whole bunch of us who just stuck up the joint. It was bad. I want to say Maine, after a lot of back and forth, got ballot access for Joe Jorgensen by less than 20 signatures. So if any one of us had bailed that weekend, it was like a dozen or something stupid. If anyone, this is why this is important. If any one of us had bailed, we wouldn't have had Maine ballot access. We wouldn't have had a wonderful northern swing. We wouldn't have had 50 state access. All right. Because a bunch of people got up there, stuck up the joint, but somehow just held on and out of sheer, I don't know, but we did it and we got on.
Yeah.
And that's why every single effort, doesn't matter whether you're doing what I do. I mean, I got to tell you, I get to do things that most libertarians don't with this job. All right. I get to ask really challenging economic and legal questions philosophical questions of people who, frankly, who run our country, who don't have the stones to be. They shouldn't be in charge. It's worse than you think.
Mm-hmm.
All right, when you ask fundamental questions like corporate welfare, how is it ever appropriate for taxpayers to fund, for example, I call it Rich Stadium, whatever the new Bill Stadium is. How is that ever appropriate? Well, what do you mean? Well, simply put, if you've got a business in the area, your taxes are going to subsidize your competition because they're getting an artificial subsidy. If they build that stadium on private money up in Buffalo and they come up with these gorgeous restaurants inside that crush local competition, it's all private money, that's capitalism. That's the free market at work. But if they're able to subsidize those restaurants and those businesses that are going to compete and probably put out of business local businesses, that's wrong. And supporters of corporate and crony capitalism like to think, as I call it, is that some sort of philosophical speed bump, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's at the essence of the relationship between taxpayer and government. It's at the essence of what the free market and free enterprise is supposed to mean in this country. And as libertarians, corporate welfare, in addition to criminal justice reform, is just great issues to hang our hats on. Just great issues. Because we proved to folks in the BIPOC community that we're not heartless, we're not Republicans. Because people conflate us Republicans all the time. Republicans constantly say, one of the things I have to fight against is that Republicans constantly say they're libertarian leaning. Now, imagine if you're a 20-something-year-old cisgender practicing heterosexual male and you identify as Republican, you're never going to get a date. I have no idea what women would want to date you. So of course you say you're libertarian because that's a lot cooler, right? To be if you're a young guy. And then I ask them how they feel about borders, the drug war, sex work, corporate welfare, and they show their true belief system, which is they're authoritarians who happen to call themselves Republicans. But all of these issues that I talked about tonight are wonderful things to put in place. And I'll stir up a little shit here. There's a former congressman who, in his last days, flipped to being a libertarian congressman. And there's this cult of personality around him. Ooh. He recently claimed that activism should be a separate organization from a political organization. And plain and simple, that's bullshit. I have no other polite way to say it. Excuse me. At this point, I think I killed there are going to be more bleeps in my sense.
Oh, we don't bleep things. This is free speech media, motherfuckers.
Right. It is absolute bullshit.
Yeah.
To think that you can run a political philosophy without activism. Well, if you don't connect with a local community and have an approach, a legitimate philosophical approach to the issues that matter to them, you simply will gain no foothold in that community whatsoever.
So I'll push back slightly because I think that you can't have a successful political movement without activism. But I tend to agree with what Amash was saying there, and actually I was there for that speech in Michigan and I got to talk to him afterwards, and like I very much agree with what he was saying there, and I've actually said the same thing to the Mises Caucus people myself. Like I went on the LP Pennsylvania Mises Caucus podcast about 2 years ago now, and had basically the same conversation with them as what Amash was saying. And basically, if you look at the other two parties, the Democratic Party isn't doing that much activism. There are a bunch of nonprofit organizations that are doing activism and then funneling their members into Democratic voters. So I think that it needs to be a two-pronged approach where, and in my opinion, it frees up a lot of the kind of, as you've called it, Game of Thrones mentality within the party, and makes it not necessary. If we have more people doing what you're doing with the coalition, and less people trying to take over state parties, so that they can do the thing within the LP, I think that we would have a much more successful party. And then we still need the party as a vehicle, especially for the people that we were talking about earlier, like that got brought in by Gary Johnson. I think that there's a huge chunk of the population that needs to see a principled, professional, realistic, kind of pragmatic, but with some radical messaging here and there, like party that's doing the thing. Maybe a little bit better than Gary and Joe, but I think that there's a chunk of the population that's what's going to bring them in, and then there's a chunk of the population that you are the power marching in the streets is what's going to bring them into the movement. And what we need to make sure we're doing is when someone is going to run for president or governor or something like that, they're tapping all of these organizations as for volunteers, for outreach, for they're doing stuff with them. We've seen a bunch of the LP candidates marching with You Are the Power at a bunch of these things. When you work together like that, I think that's how it works out. And that's kind of what Amash was getting to. We don't want activists in the liberty movement. It's that the way that I always say it is, why jump through the hoops and do all of the paperwork for a party when all you really need is a simple like LLC or 501c3, and then you get so much more freedom, so much less tax liability, all of these other benefits to doing it outside of the party, that I think the Mises PAC could have been a lot more successful if they just did the thing instead of the takeover. That's my argument.
Let me give you a little pushback, gentle pushback. First of all, the Republican Party is so much further along that you do reach a point where it makes sense to have outside. It could be not-for-profits, it could be PACs, it could be all sorts of things. But right now, we're saddled with a terrible reputation as a party. We are one of the reasons why I touched on some of these issues is that activism by the party overcomes a lot of the challenges we face. According to some people, we're Koch brother loving corporatists. Well, we neither get the Koch brother money, nor are we. I mean, we're free market people who actively, as a party, and this is the difference. I'll use Rhode Island as an example. No one in Rhode Island would claim at this point, with a straight face, after literally running picket lines. I mean, I'll call old school picket lines at different corporate crony and air quotes investments. The first stage before you get to the luxury of being a Republican, where you've got an established presence, where you've been able to re-engineer the state presence, the state authority to conform and support your party as they do in states across the nation, with supporting primaries and campaign financing and not arguing about debate access and things like that. That's a further step. Right now, the problem is that the libertarian brand is associated with a lot of negative connotations, almost none of which are true. They're just simply not. But until the Libertarian Party overcomes that, and activism is the only way to do that, then we're not going to get the traction necessary to become establishment Republicans who do nothing but virtue signal like Hamas. All right. So we're just not. So it is thoroughly unrealistic to think that libertarians can gain any sort of traction unless they've got that engagement in the community. And you don't get that overnight. It's going to take a very long time. And the ideal time to begin, quite frankly, is tomorrow morning. People get up and get active and engage in principled nonviolent civil disobedience. Engage in activism, because until we've done several things as libertarians in Rhode Island. Number one, we fought corporate welfare hard. Again, picket lines, testimony, literally hundreds of call-ins. When we were fighting the stadium projects in Rhode Island, the local NBC affiliate would actually send a camera at 3 occasions, sent a camera truck to me. I was a chair at the time of the state party, and sent a camera truck literally 40 miles to get a 3-minute sound clip, which turned into a 30-second sound clip for me. All right. Because we were so provocatively opposed on principle, economic principle and philosophical principle. That's activism. And it was conducted by the party, and the party benefited from that. I'm routinely seen as someone who, because you get to the media question. The media, there's this notion that the media has to be independent. And those days are done. I'm going to stress this. Anyone can do this. If I can do it, anyone can do it. All right. Media needs to report, analyze. We testify. I engage, and I actually worked on and helped present the Defend the Guard legislation in Rhode Island. We got my story to show up in a tour de force performance. Again, we have it all on video, and we got him as an expert witness in front of the Rhode Island State General Assembly on the on gun legislation, gun grabbing legislation, tour de force performance. All right. We engage in actual mutual aid. We engage in the support. I engage in the support of charities. All right. Actually engaging in the day-to-day work, not just talking about it. And one of the things I've tried to do with the party through the affiliate support committee, I've only had mixed luck, quite frankly, is where we actually engage in humanitarian support, and we reach out to affiliates around the country to help fund it through donations, either direct cash donations or indirect purchasing on wish lists. We made 4 separate trips to Vermont during the Vermont flooding, which was horrific. After the first week, it got very little press, but Vermont was devastated. We made 4 sets of trips up to Vermont with van loads, sadly not truckloads, but van loads, all right, of supplies, water, mops, cleaning materials, harm reduction supplies. I brought up naloxone. I brought up what am I thinking about? I brought up fentanyl test strips. I brought up crack pipes. I delivered all of that personally to harm reductionists in Vermont, including, like I said, the practical aspects, cleaning supplies, fans, and we raised thousands of dollars, but not nearly what you would think from a libertarian party that preaches that government should be not involved in charity, that it should be private charity. Yeah. So one of my goals is to promote private charity by libertarians stepping up and, true to our philosophy, replacing government intervention. We got up there before a lot of the FEMA stuff. We were up there within 2 days the first time around. Now, it's not nearly as successful as I want it to be, but I'm going to continue to work on that as a libertarian who's allegedly part of the national leadership, allegedly. But if the party needs to engage in that type of activity early on because of the negative connotation that libertarianism has amongst a significant part of the country, that we are heartless, that we do not care about people, when, quite frankly, as folks who, what do we like to say? We defend the ultimate minority, the individual. We absolutely care more about people than our Democratic and Republican friends. And so we need to break through that window. And at that point in time, when the party has got a much deeper base of support, then we can spin off things. And I'll be spinning off things. But I got to push back against that because our reputation is not good on a lot of issues. And it's unfortunate because it's based on ignorance, and that ignorance is our inability to project, not just in words, but in action, what we truly believe. So that's my pushback against Amash, his statements. And, he lives in a special little world where he gets a virtue signal on a national level. And what can I say?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll say that as I said before, I think that the party, there are so many different ways that people can be brought into the movement, and activism by the party always a good thing. My argument is more so that it is easier to do outside of the party, and if you do it outside of the party and still call yourself a libertarian, it still helps what you're talking about with the name recognition for the word. When we have groups like how am I going to space on this? The Firearm Policy Coalition is one of the best gun rights organizations, and as far as like doing the work and like showing up to these cases and legally representing people, like they're knocking it out of the park, right? And they actively call themselves a either anarchist or libertarian organization, and they're constantly promoting people like Spike Cohen, like Chase Oliver, like I think they've done some work with Maj and other big L libertarians. The last time or I guess 2 times ago now that I saw Spike, it was, he was following up an FPC speech at a local thing. And, it was something put on by the state party. FPC's there talking about all of the cases that they're doing. Actually, I think technically it was an event put on by a local small business that the state party helped orchestrate. And then, got a bunch of different organizations, including You Are the Power and the State Party and FPC and a bunch of different people to come together. And so I guess my argument is not that we shouldn't do activism. It's just that a lot of times it's easier to break through a lot of those barriers if you're not carrying the banner of the party and you're carrying the banner of a single issue coalition nonprofit.
Well, and you see, again, as someone who's done both and is doing both, we're running candidates. Our candidates need to be associated with activism and local activism, highly local activism, all right, in order to succeed.
100% agreed. I just think that it works out better when you can do like the tax breaks and kind of if you can have the organizations and the candidates working together, like Chase marching with "You Are the Power" type stuff. I think
but that's
best
on a highly local level, on a distributed level across the country. Quite frankly, that's hard to do. And again, you're right; these organizations do some wonderful things. Firearm policy
100%.
It is magic. But again, right now, if you look at the history of successful organizations, some that would be considered terroristic, some that would be considered old school mobs, some that would be considered political, terroristic. And when I talk about terroristic and old school mob, of course, I'm talking about the New York Democratic Party. And then of course there's, other organizations. They've always succeeded in their early stages because of their intimate connections to the local community, addressing issues, whether it be poverty or any one of 1,000 things. Yeah. We haven't gone through that first stage yet. There's got to be, it's a branding issue. It's one thing for the Firearm Policy Coalition to go in and again, to do some amazing stuff. No worries there, big fan. But if the Libertarian Party, it isn't the Libertarian Party actually engaging in local activism, then that connection, that transfer is often not made. And again, I'll just point to our opposition in Rhode Island. Twice the state tried to build palatial, if you will, minor league baseball stadiums. I was told by a lot of people, and a lot of people owe me coffees, that I was wasting my time, that it was going to happen. A quick drive-through, and it's a quick drive-through, it's only about 44 miles, up through the state, you will realize that there are no minor league baseball teams. And we were able to, as a party, capitalize on that issue and define it both as an economic failure and a philosophical failure. And there are a lot of good other people who joined in that fight. I'm not going to say we're the only ones. We were given a lot of credit in the media. I can point to media pieces where it said, the Libertarian Party led by, and it was a team effort. At the time I was a state chair, Billy Hunters, he did a marvelous job. I happen to be the person who was the front forward face of the party as a chair, he often is, but it was a team effort. And, so as was, and I promise you a story before I left tonight, as was when we fired Bill Weld. That's a story you want to hear. But it was a genuine team effort from the party. So the party did the work and the party benefited because no one in Rhode Island could recall a libertarian at this point, a crony capitalist, because again, we literally ran picket lines. There was a local building that was trying to qualify for about $100+ million in aid to rebuild this Art Deco building. It was a beautiful building. And, I love to see it rebuilt, just no taxpayer money, right?
Yeah.
So the local historical commission in Providence, which is actually a force to be reckoned with, Providence is an amazing place to see history. So much of it was preserved because of these people. They do some beautiful work, but, they were all over because it's a, endangered building, blah, 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 blah. So they decided as a PR move to have open houses in this beautiful office tower, with the, again, very Art Deco. And they scheduled, I want to say, don't hold me to this number, 7 different open houses. We showed up in a picket line in front of the building, old school. I was a chair, so I get to hold the boulevard and do the chants. Hey, hey, ho, ho. Corporate welfare's got to go, right? That was a chair. I get to do that. All right. But it was a team effort. And we intentionally, one of the lessons, I teach some stuff about our media. And one of the things I've always try to teach activists and libertarians is that you go where the media is going to be. So the media covered every one of those 6 open houses. Now, remember, 6. We were always there. And of course, the media, we're standing there with picket lines. So they're going to interview the people in the building. And then they came out and interviewed us. I want to say that you did it 6 times, and they actually canceled the 7th one because we were getting more publicity as the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island, not as a third-party organization, but the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island, for standing outside of a building and saying taxpayer money should not be used. And we educated taxpayers on the fact that their money was at stake in a private development. And that's just wrong. We all agree on that. But the beneficiary of that activism wasn't a third-party agency. It wasn't an individual candidate. It was the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island. The Libertarian Party of Rhode Island was the beneficiary of shooting down 2 baseball stadium proposals, which would have been an $80 to $100 million investment, which for Rhode Island is big money. They ultimately left the team. It was a AAA affiliate of the Boston Red Sox, the Paw Sox, right? They ultimately left Rhode Island and went to Worcester, where Worcester built at the time the most expensive minor league baseball park in America for them. And the city of Worcester now, within its first 2 years, is writing checks to support the debt service.
Yep.
They're actually literally writing checks out of city money because another show, another time. Anytime we want to talk about corporate welfare, as most of these never do, the money that was, when people look at stadium projects, everybody focuses on attendance. Wow, attendance is great. Attendance means nothing in terms of financing stadium projects.
Not even
It's
a
all
little bit.
it's all about extra tax income that's developed by private investment in that region. They call it TIF. All right, so tax incentive finance. And the trouble is that the consultants all come up with these fabulous projections that are never, ever met. And then all of a sudden you have a situation where taxpayers are on the hook and are writing checks for the stadium that no one cares about.
Yep.
Because ultimately, after the first 2 or 3 years, attendance always drops, blah, blah, blah. Again, it was the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island that got credit for fighting it. And that's what needs to happen in the early stages. When we get to be a mature, financially deep political interest, then we can spin stuff up. But in the meantime, like I said, I'll debate Amash anytime on that issue.
Yeah,
because
I guess
it's just
I'll like semi concede and clarify that my take on the Mises Caucus specifically is what it is because they had the PAC already, successful, well funded. If
take human action,
right? Like if you already have a state party that's kind of doing some stuff and you can join in and make a protest or a picket line or something like that happen with your state party, then all power to if it's actually easier to do it within the party than to do it within a different organization, then do it within the party, whatever gets it done faster. And but I'll say my take on the caucus is just that they had a PAC that already had control of multiple Twitter accounts that were bigger than LP National, had a bunch of influence, had decent funding, had really big names associated with it. Like they could have done almost everything they wanted to do without participating in inside baseball at all and just running with it as a PAC. And they already had it. So like that's why my take with them is different than, I guess, if somebody listening is like, I want to do a thing, that's a lot different. But if you're listening and you kind of want to do a thing and you are part of the Mises Caucus, talk to them about doing it as part of the PAC too. Like get all of the people involved that we can, I guess, is my
on a high level. You're absolutely right. Listen, at this point, anything we can get or anything we can do to promote people from a couple nights a week, or just say one night a week, turning off their damn computer and going out into the streets, whether it be city council, town council, any of that, anything we can do to promote any activism at any level. At this point, I'm 100% behind. Happy to give advice. If I'm somewhat local, I'll show up. Thrilled to do it. I just see early on a lot of potential gain for the party if we become more associated with these causes. Because again, well, this time I think it's going to end up New York's tough with the ballot access laws. That's why I refer to them as a gangland operation. I mean, here's another issue. Libertarians should be beating the streets on. I've taken on, and I'm going to be working with our Secretary of State this year to try and reduce the requirements in order to become a political party. And we'll see how that goes. There's a chance that we might have some success. Right now, there's very powerful 2 words that we should be using as libertarians with regard to ballot access: voter suppression. But wait, we're doing everything we can do to get people to vote, to get them the right to vote. Okay, I have no problem with it. There are any of that crap. I don't obsess like my Republican friends over the the infamy of early voting, or I just don't care. Anything that'll make, if people want to vote, great. All right. But at the same time, if you don't have choices in who to vote for, all right, that's voter suppression. So right now in New York, they made it wicked easy for people to vote. You just have to vote for the one or two choices they're willing to give you, which is why we have to use the term voter suppression. And we have to call out aggressively elected officials who refuse to reform the system. All right. Because they are, I'm going to use the word, as far as I'm concerned, they're political terrorists.
Yeah.
Gangland operations.
Yeah.
And I'll say that to anything I haven't said to people directly. And that's what we need to do. We need to position, particularly in places like New York. We have to shame them. We just do. Our survival depends upon it because they've clearly found a sweet spot where they can keep pushing the envelope, and to the point where we simply can't overcome the ballot exit rules. So,
when I was in New York City, when I was in New York City petitioning for Larry Sharp, I was very what's the word I'm looking for? Shameless. With my pitch. It was, hey, do you want to get a black man who's being suppressed from getting on the ballot for governor?
Works for me.
Worked fucking great in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, let me tell you. It's like, hey, did you know that they're trying to keep this guy off the ballot just because he's black? Everyone else on the ballot is white except this guy, and this is the guy they're trying to keep off the ballot. You think there's anything about that?
No, I think it's wonderful. And there's a very simple question. Why are you a racist? You ask him that.
Yeah.
It's like I said, I asked my governor, what do you have against poor old people? Why do you hate old people?
I think one of my absolute favorite cursings out that I've ever gotten on the streets. I was in California stopping the ban on flavored tobacco products.
Right.
They tried to ban it, pass the state, and signed by the governor, and then they put it on the ballot to get repealed, and it got repealed. And I had a woman come up to me and tell me that I was trying to kill black people because black people smoke menthol cigarettes, and to keep menthol cigarettes legal is to want to kill black people. And I'm like, my literal instant response, because I was having a very bad day at this point already, and then I just went off to smoke a joint and kind of calm down a little bit. Didn't really work. Got some texts from some people that made my day a little bit worse, a non-professional life, and then went back out, and the second person I tried to stop tells me that I'm trying to kill black people. And so I just turn around and I go, well, you're just trying to lock up black people. Why do you like seeing black people in jail? And the look on this fucking 38-year-old Karen's face, I swear to God, because she further on almost got the signature. Her name was Karen. It was great.
But no,
the look on her face was priceless.
When Maj was in Providence, now imagine this. Again, there's a video.
He's great at that.
Yeah. So he, like I said, we were able to set him up. A Republican state representative, David Place, was able to get us the connections to set him up as a favored witness, which essentially he went second or third, and there was no time limit. So it was very important. And we raised money to get him in. Maj waived any appearance fee, but we had to put him up, fly him in. Because he was out in the Midwest at libertarian conventions, and we put him up overnight. And obviously, we wanted to make sure he got the time he needed. So he walks in, and he's waiting on the testimony. We're waiting, and right before he's about to go, he leaves the room. Where'd he go? Where'd he go? Where'd he go? And he comes back in, and he had a pullover. And, he had the glasses, the whole thing. And he turns around to this highly liberal, very white, older crowd full of all the people who sit at meetings with their lips permanently pursed. And, the women are doing macrame and have stacks of old magazines next to them, right? The whole shtick. And he turns around and he takes off his pullover. And of course, there's a shirt that says Black Guns Matter. And the whole room went, whoa, okay. And then when he was Paul proceeded to spend about 20 minutes answering questions from legislators about why white people are racist by denying BIPOC community the right to bear arms. All right. And it was spectacular. And two of the news stations, we got him. And this is why Prime was important. We already had lined up. We had him an hour on our local talk radio station, an hour. Then he came over, got ready for the testimony, and then we had 2 live interviews set up. One pre, 2 post, actual testimony, and the news led off with it. And actually, if you've done it, you've seen a news piece. He actually took the piece, led off with him, talked to a couple other people, and then came back to him in one case. And then he gave a speech an impromptu speech in the rotunda of our state house at the Basilica to the crowd. And we caught most of it on video. And boy, in 28 hours, he landed some knockout punches. And I don't know, a lot of people did a lot of work, but there were no gun legislation passed in this year, which was a real shock to the folks who sat up front and with wiry gray hair and do macrame and sit with you've seen it, large quantities of old magazines to read while they're permanently tutting and scolding. We're talking about human scold here. Anyone who wants to have any level of personal liberty whatsoever, because quite simply they know better, right? I mean, why should I be making my own decisions? They know what is right. And again, the Libertarian Party, in conjunction with the Republican Party on that one, got a lot of spin.
Yeah,
got a lot of positivity out of that. It was a great day. It widely exceeded any expectations I had. It was a tour de force. And
I'd love to see it.
Yeah, no, so there's a lot of there's a lot of frustration, a lot of chaos, a lot of negativity, a lot of libertarian Game of Thrones right now in the party. But there's also a lot of good things happening. And I would just ask everybody, rather than focus on seemingly thinking that your takeover of the party is actually an act of liberty of an individual affiliate, that your constant arguments about what's going on in the party I would much rather hear from those people, because I would imagine a lot of those people are doing good things. I'd really rather hear about them, about the things they're doing to fight the state. I'd love to hear that stuff.
Yes,
Even
please.
there are people who I ran against. I don't care. That's where the energy puts it. And there's a lot of folks from the crew that didn't win who are astonishingly negative, just from the get-go, because they didn't win.
Yep.
And I understand it's frustrating. I've lost. I know what it feels like. But again, just focus on positive action. That's all I'm asking. I'm not going to name who wrote this. I'm going to ask you for a kindness in a second, because I just want to read what somebody posted publicly on social media. This wasn't a private post or a private message. But do you mind if I just quote it really quickly?
Go for it.
All right. So if you think about social issues, if you think kindness is an important quality, and if you supported the 2016 LP presidential ticket, you are not welcome in the LP. Stop giving them money, don't buy a convention package, and don't support your state party if it supports this LNC. That was from a leader in the libertarian movement. You know what? I believe in kindness. I do a lot of things personally because you know what? That we're supposed to lead libertarian lives. Nothing special. I supported the 2016 LP presidential ticket. I give some money. I don't have a lot to give. My business supports a lot of things, but we try. I'll end up buying a convention package, and I'm going to support my party. I'm all of those things, and guess what? I'm on the Libertarian National Committee. So how can you claim? And this was someone who is a powerful figure in the movement. You didn't win, and things aren't being done the way you like. So you just say.
Are you gonna say who it was if I ask? Okay, never mind.
No, I'm not here to call individual people out.
Fair enough.
I'm here.
Can you tell me when we go offline? Because I have a theory.
Okay. No, that's fine.
Because most likely whoever it is has me blocked, so I would never have seen that post.
Maybe they don't. But the point being, I'm here to criticize behavior, not and the notion that I didn't win. So what's that meme that goes around? You were mean. I don't like you, so you're Hitler or however that goes. You're just a terrible person because I didn't win, or I didn't get what I wanted, or people are trying something new. I got to tell you, I haven't seen. I'm friends now with a lot of people that I didn't know before. I was full disclosure. In my race for the LNC Region 8, I was endorsed by the caucus, and the caucus turned out for me. I've got to know a lot of people that I hadn't known before. I don't know a single racist on the Libertarian National Committee. I don't know a single bore. I don't know anyone who isn't doing anything but their best in very difficult circumstances. And so I'm still not in the caucus. I'm not in any caucus. I probably most identify as a radical libertarian, but it's
in the
important.
Waffle House caucus. That's my
there you go. And by the way, I love smoked salmon. So, and so
seafood caucus is another really good one.
Yeah, no. But stop it.
Yeah.
Everybody should just. Right now, we need to double down getting ready for the election, and whoever gets a nomination, everybody should do their best. And we need to end the whataboutism. Well, this person didn't do it, and that person. You don't control that person's behavior. As a libertarian, supposedly we allow everybody to make their own decisions. And you know what? If that's how you want to behave, that's fine. I don't tell people what to do. We're libertarians. You get to do what you want. But at the same time, if the minute things don't go your way, you just bail completely on the organization. I'm sorry. Last time around, people got elected that I didn't particularly, not that I didn't care for them. I just didn't believe in their philosophy. I didn't believe in worshiping at the altar of moderate Republicans. I want to point out, I'll give you my quick version of the Bill Weld story. The Libertarian Party of Rhode Island was the party. A lot of people bitch about Bill Weld. There was only one party that fired him. That was us. A few days before the election, he made the infamous appearance on MSNBC. And the thing that offended me was the fact that not I'm here for Hillary or any of that crap. He was asked specifically if, in fact, Gary Johnson was the best candidate for president. And Bill Weld refused to answer that question. To this day, even though I've become more radical, I believe in the 2016 election, Gary Johnson unequivocally, absolutely was the best person in the race to be president.
Oh, yeah, no question.
And that we would be a better country, and we would be a lot of things would be different if he was elected president.
So
much. So Weld did that whole routine. I'm getting calls. We had 3 candidates running for our General Assembly in Rhode Island. Now, we've been after Weld all year. Rhode Island's 30 miles away from where he lives. Just to get him to come in and make a campaign appearance. I had it set up with local media. He could give a speech on whatever he wants. We have a spectacular location looking out on Narragansett Bay that he was going to be able to speak at with the bay as a backdrop on a podium. Talk about whatever he wants. If we raised money, we'd split it with him. We'd give it to him. I didn't care. It was more about, and then he would endorse our candidates. He refused to do it. A couple of days before the election, or maybe a week or two before the election, they talk about having a night or two before the election, having a rally for him in Providence. And we did the arrangements and everything. After that, people had it. They'd already had it with his failure to stand up for 2A. And we'd already had it with his obnoxious behavior. So we had it. So when that happened, I'm getting calls from candidates that I will not go on the stage with him. So I said, all right, let's knock heads together. We're a team. One of the guys came up with, and I embraced it, we got to fire him. And so myself and our press person spent the better part of that night, staying up all night, writing a press release, withdrawing our endorsement from him. Still up on our social media. And then we fired him. And that I may have, in my haste, purely an accident, didn't mean it, might have released it to Associated Press and our local media before I sent it to them. Oops. Oopsie poopsie.
Nice.
The world goes on, the libertarian world goes on fire. There's a guy from California who's an activist who put my cell phone number out on social media. All right. And again, you've got to know me a little bit. You think I'm afraid of phone calls? No. I took every phone call that night. People started a couple times were screaming at me. We had a conversation, explained to them why. I said, I can't in good conscience support a candidate who is willing to support Hillary Clinton and not willing to support Gary Johnson. I can't.
Yeah.
And it became a Reason picked it up. It became a shitstorm for about 2 or 3 days. And it's still the best decision I ever made.
I remember that. I wasn't even like, I was a enrolled libertarian, but I had never gone to a meeting yet. And I was just like barely within the sphere of influence on like social media and stuff. I remember that shit. That was like the first LP inside baseball scandal that I knew about, basically. And I was like, what do you mean? I was so against that when I first heard about it. I was like, you fucking idiots, this guy is great. Obviously, like I said, like I had at this point never been to a meeting. The only thing I knew about Bill Weld was stuff that the campaign had put out, basically. And I hadn't seen the interview. I just saw the press release and I was like, what? And it was like maybe 2 months later before I actually watched the interview, because it really wasn't getting shared around all that much. I guess I wasn't enough inside the social media sphere for me to be seeing the hate shares of that interview. I just saw the campaign trying to like shut it down, basically, and so I didn't see much of it. I just saw the press release and I was like, what on earth? Obviously now I'm in complete agreement and support with that decision, but I made some very questionable takes early on in my libertarian.
That was it. You know, that was inside baseball. But if you were trying to deal with the campaign, because the campaign was very difficult to deal with, again,
almost worse than 2020 from what I've heard.
A 45-minute drive from his home to a reception, again, with media, give a speech, we'll give you some money. That's it. That's all we asked, and endorse our state reps. Yeah. That's all. That's all we ever wanted. We couldn't even get the time of day, and it's unfortunate because that whole episode with Will cost us dearly. We got more votes. Rhode Island is one of the most difficult states in the nation to get, party status. You've got to either get 5% of the presidential race or 5% of the gubernatorial race, which alternate every 2 years. And if let's just say Gary had gotten 5%, we would have only been able to hold it until the next presidential election, but it would have had some real world ramifications for us and who we were going to be able to recruit as candidates. That campaign should have gotten us over that 5%, and it didn't. And I blame Bill Weld for part of that. The Aleppo thing. Understand that we early on in the campaign, I spent a lot of time doing earned media, a lot. I teach a course on how to get earned media and how to use it for your good. And I was on our local talk radio station 4 or 5 times a week talking about the Johnson-Weld campaign. And the first disaster, of course, was the infamous striptease. I had a radio call for the next morning, right, with one of the local radio stations. And I was all set for it to give like a powerful speech about the 2 most competent governors in America are running for president, why that would be so powerful for us, how successful both of them were under very difficult circumstances. I had that all lined up. I get on the radio, and the first thing the guy says, so why are people doing stripteases at your convention? Now, you only get...
Because they're James motherfucking Weeks, that's why.
Right, you get enough, understand media. You got 3 or 4 minutes in that phone call. And if you get in 2 or 3 points, it's a home run. Yeah. You get seconds. All right. When he screwed up with Aleppo, and I blame Gary for that, because one of the reasons why I publish a lot of foreign policy material, and I get shit from some people for it, because wait, that's not libertarian, that's establishment. Well, if you don't understand the establishment material, if you're not, as a presidential candidate, if you're not getting briefed, we had Scott Horton as a resource, and
we did. He didn't.
He didn't use them. That's my understanding.
Yeah.
Please, anyone can correct me if I'm wrong.
Dave Smith was there that day. He was next up and watched it happen live, like in the fucking studio, and knocked foreign policy out of the fucking park because he talks to Scott Horton.
Right.
And it's absolutely ridiculous. Kind of to bring, I guess, the conversation full circle, we do have a lot of these other third-party organizations already, like antiwar.com, that if the party and the candidates aren't using that as a resource, you're being ridiculous. I've actually been in contact with a couple of the antiwar.com people, trying to get them on policy teams for our presidential candidates, because that's what we need.
And right now we're at war. We're in a proxy war. If we're running a presidential candidate at a minimum of 3 or 4 times a week, that candidate should be spending an hour uninterrupted, at minimum, with a back and forth with the likes of Scott Horton, who's going to be highly organic and deliver and give you deliverables that you can walk away with. All right. Yeah. We've got some, again, wicked smart people here, all right, who are, quite frankly, at times, I think, I'm not saying this is Scott or anybody, I think at times are almost hurt because you've got this expertise in the party and you're not using it enough. And that's up to the candidates. And again, they run their campaigns, they steer their ship. But to not take advantage of that. And again, that's one of the reasons. I will tell you, I did a candidate show for 2 years on LPTV. And I interviewed I think I interviewed you. Didn't I interview you?
I don't think so. I think you started doing that after my race.
Okay. So, but one of the things I found, one of the questions I always ask if someone was running for local office was, all right, and remember, the role of that candidate show was not to be a gotcha, but was to kind of give them some gentle training as far as just being on radio or being on TV. Give them a little chance to have a little back and forth. I'll ask a couple of questions, but I'm not there to embarrass them. I'm just there so that's the first time they're not. I don't know if you're old enough to be a Honeymooners fan, but one of the epic episodes of the Honeymooners, look this up, is when Jackie Gleason, who played Ralph Cramden, goes on TV to pitch his Vegematic tool.
Yeah. And
right before he goes on the air, Norton says to him, "And don't worry, Ralphie, you're gonna," and something effective. This is an opportunity. You'll have millions of people watching you. And Ralphie boy goes, freezes. We don't want that happening. But the takeaway was, if it was a local candidate, I'd ask, well, tell me about your school system. And I always get the stock answer, it's an indoctrination camp. And first of all, normies don't want to hear that. All right. Then I'd ask the question, now get this, how is your school education funded in your community?
Well, I don't know.
It's taxes. Well, no. If you're running for local office and you don't understand the funding mechanism for your community schools, and you're going to be a mayor or a city councilman or on the school committee, you're going to get eaten alive by the counties. My progressive friends are going to eat you for lunch. And if you don't understand, because it could be wildly different. It could be local property taxes. It could be a revenue share from the state. It could be anything. But you need to know, and you need to understand if it's working or not, if it's fair. And so the reason I bring that all up is because libertarians are not well-schooled. They're well-schooled in being a libertarian. But when it comes to issues about the normies, very often they've got a couple of cliches. And I'm not knocking, these are good people. And I always ended the show by thanking them, because running for political office as a libertarian is a real commitment and a real sacrifice, both financially, time-wise, and frankly, in your stature in the community. I mean, you're doing something that's highly patriotic and highly libertarian. And again, I want to do anything I can to help those people, because they're really putting themselves out there. So I'm not knocking them, but what I am challenging libertarian candidates to do is be very well versed in the issues, because you're running against people for whom government is their career, the center of their lives, their social lives, everything.
Yeah.
And who have the ability, for a number of reasons, we can go into another show, have the resource and the ability to do nothing but be activists.
Yeah.
That's the kind of challenges. And Gary didn't meet that.
Yeah.
Love him, but he wasn't prepared. We all saw, you brought it up at the beginning of the show, we all saw the moment where, would you legalize heroin? The greatest answer in the world. What a moment. And we're all watching, and we all just kind of groaned. If he had said yes, it would have exploded the universe.
Yep.
People's heads literally would have exploded.
Yep. And Ron Paul had already said it at this point. That is my biggest issue. Is the infamous Ron Paul speech in South Carolina predates this by what, 8 years?
Yeah, but this was on national TV, and I get that. You're exactly right. But this was a moment in time where, for that brief month or so, the Libertarian candidate was considered a player. Maybe not a winner, but a player. He was being taken at face level. Again, both. I mean, Gary took a broken New Mexico and left it financially solvent. Bill Weld, for his time, took on the labor unions, the state. I mean, he took on everything. Both of those guys were not only successful, but they literally were political profiles of courage because of what each of them did. Now, it's dated now, but we can't not, even with Bill Weld, not respect the type of things they did while they were in office. Because at the time, that was wildly libertarian. I mean, it's just happened before, particularly Weld in Massachusetts. You know, he took on the political firmament in a way that no one had ever done before. You know, he was a trailblazer.
Yeah.
And he's a dick. I liked him initially for that. So, you know, but, you know, so we just have to do better. We have to be, very often when women enter various careers, academia, particularly say 10 or 20 years ago, they were breaking through that ceiling. And very often they had to be better. And it was unfair, but they had to be better. They had to be pretty much perfect. Again, unfair. Politically, we have to look at it the same way. We have to be on our A game, you know, and if we're not, we're going to get eaten alive. We're going to feed the beast, and they're going to point to us and say we're not competent to run government. And if we don't run government, we can't end government.
Yep.
It really is that simple.
100%. Before we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to tell people how to find all of the videos and stuff that you've done. You know, I've got the links up below, but and definitely let people know anything cool that's going on in Region 8 coming up.
Well, you know what? Well, first of all, let's talk about the region. Maine is Maine and New York are listen. Every state needs help right now, and I'm begging people to find ways. And it doesn't have to be to Region 8. If you live in a state and that affiliate isn't demanding of your time right now, to volunteer time, whether it be phone calls, a little bit of money. Listen, you've run for office in a difficult environment. I don't know if it happened to you, but I've had candidates get checks from people they never met, from parts of the country that aren't even remotely connected to where they are. And it could be a $50 check. It could be a $25 check. And it
Definitely didn't happen to me. I wish.
Well, yeah, he did talk to me. All right, but you know, it changed the arc of their day because all of a sudden, come in on a day which had been pure pain. So if folks around the country can just understand that what happens in Maine or happens in New York or what happens in fill in the blanks, Florida, California, is just as important as what's happening in your home state for all of us, do something about it. Small, big, whatever you can do, you know, just do something to help them out. Maine right now is a hot topic because if we get and they're working at it, they've raised a lot of money on their own. They just got $5,000 from national and another $3,000 or $5,000 is going to directly support an outside canvasser. They've raised a lot of money on their own. We got to get them over that because I will tell you, if Maine gets this, you know, somewhat permanent party status, it will save the party a fortune and will give us a platform in one of the most interesting political states for libertarians in the country. Again, separate votes, if you will. You break up their vote as far as the presidential election. You got ranked choice voting. You've got parts of the state that are wildly libertarian. You got parts of the state that are not. But it's the real opportunity to gain a toehold and go after that mythical electoral college vote that we need that will break through. It can happen in Maine. Split electoral votes. That's what I was trying to say in a minute ago. So, and again, support Vermont. They've had terrible floods this year. They need humanitarian support. We're already there. We're doing things. They've got a great local party. New York needs help with their new direction in terms of trying to focus on party building, right? Every state has got something worthy to support. So I just want to promote that first. As far as my efforts go, Facebook.com/the Coalition Radio. A lot of stuff goes, folks who don't do what I do don't understand how much time it takes just to put videos up, particularly when you're taking 5 or 6 a day. After I get done here, I got to go back to work and start putting up stuff. So a lot of stuff goes live stream directly from Facebook.com/the Coalition Radio. It's bigly fun. You can go to my YouTube channel. I'm closing in on 3,000 videos of political events, mostly in the last 2 years. Everything from protests to trial footage. We're challenging right now. A Rhode Island policeman actually shot a young man after a stop earlier this year. He managed to get off. He's in jail again. There's all sorts of laws in place in Rhode Island which protect him. He's been charged with another felony. I film a lot in courts because I don't know why, but they let me. So I film in court. Federal courts won't let you film, but I film a lot in state courts. So there's just stuff every day, and I think it's interesting because a lot of times I get to question high-level politicians about issues that affect all of us. Rhode Island's a microcosm of every other state. Blinken Watch, BLINKEN watch.com brings me to a new effort that I'm doing because I put up on my YouTube channel. You'll see hundreds of videos from the State Department, from the Defense Department, speeches by the president, because I want libertarians to have a place where they can go and watch some of this stuff. And it's worthwhile, particularly if you're running for federal office. You need to understand it's not good enough for us to use the usual cliches, about the state. We got to be smarter than that. So,
true that.
And then it's my YouTube and Twitter, and and if people follow me, I'll make every effort to follow them and just share the media love. And let's. I guess I want to close on. Everybody should try to do one thing a day to end the state. We all did it. There could be a conflagration. There could be a rebellion. There could be a change. And all it takes is tiny individual efforts in the aggregate to end the state. And I just beg everyone to try and get there in however way they can.
Hell yeah. I love it. Absolutely love it. You heard him, guys. Go and check out all the social medias that have been across the bottom of the screen, and be actually informed about what's going on. If you don't live in Rhode Island and you want to learn what's going on in your hometown, you have city council meetings. You can go to them. Definitely do that. And then come on back next week. We have Ben Weir from the Chris Franzak for President campaign, possibly Chris himself. Still not sure whether or not that's happening, but we're definitely going to be talking about the campaign and how we're bringing the hardcore metal movement into the liberty movement. That's going to be awesome. And then I'm talking to Angelo Veltri from Save Long Island the following week. That one might actually be an in-person live stream, so definitely come on back to check that out. And follow all the things. Go follow Free Speech Media Corp. There's cool new logos on all the social medias, so go like those posts because I don't know, I think it's great. Kelsey Lyons is awesome. And then come on back next week. Pat, thank you so much for coming on. This was absolutely fantastic.
Excellent. And by the way, ask Ben to bring his guitar. I had the chance to see Ben play at Liberty Stock in Vermont. And he's a great talent, and it's funny because we know him because he's the head of the emo caucus, and we know him from Pork Fest doing arguably the best party at Pork Fest.
Oh my God, that was so great!
And it was amazing.
I was tripping balls that night. It was one of the greatest experiences.
Ben's an amazingly talented person, and he's also a great guy. So make him bring his guitar and make him play a song.
I might actually do that. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll check you back here next week. Until then, keep up the fight.